I want to say this started with the Patriot Act after 9/11, but I'm young, I'm ignorant, and maybe it started earlier. When do you think America started taking the casual drive down the totalitarian way?
I mean, there are people who would, this is a debate about this, and some people would say that this goes back to the days of Hoover, it goes back to Watergate. Some people would say it goes back to Ruby Ridge, and there are certain sort of echoes from those things. So, for example, when Hillary Clinton said recently, these Trumpsters they're cultists and they need to be deprogrammed. See, so some conservatives were like, there she goes again, basket of deplorables. But see, I heard it in a little more chilling way, because when I saw what happened at Waco, I saw a lot of Americans who were uneasy because you have buildings burning, families inside, but they're like, but you know what? Those guys are kooks. They're cultists. They're wacko. They're not like us. So to me, this rhetoric of cultism is a rhetoric of dehumanization, and it can lead to very bad things. Incarceration. It can lead to Waco. Obviously, in the Nazi case, we know where that led. And but I also agree with you, and I think the film sort of takes the position that things really got going after 9/11, when a lot of people, and I'm sorry to say me included, said we have to give the government these enhanced surveillance powers and other powers. We need to collapse some of the old distinctions between, let's say, intelligence and investigation on the one hand, which was the real job of the FBI, and criminal prosecution on the other, which was considered separate. We have to blend these things together. And there were people then, Ron Paul, who warned us, you give the government this kind of power, it's going to not just can be, it will be abused. And of course, the abuses, I think, began in the Obama years, but they have dramatically escalated in the Biden years.
I want to say Alex Jones was definitely on that bandwagon of criticizing the Patriot Act. Do you remember, the Pauls, or Ron Paul, I forget which one. Do we remember who else at the time was sounding the alarm on the risks of the Patriot Act?
There were some of the libertarians who were doing that. Now, the left was doing it, but they were doing it from a very different point of view. They were doing it from the point of view of you're targeting Muslims, and this is a kind of Islamophobia. But interestingly, there's a fellow named Trevor Aronson who's done a really good job from the left of exposing the way in which the police agencies of government literally would entrap Muslims. And I'm actually right on board with him, because his point is that after 9/11, the FBI expected, and all these agencies, the DHS newly created, expected a massive surge of foreign terrorism that would justify continuing massive budgets. But when they found that maybe the U.S. airstrikes and so on had kind of decimated Al-Qaeda over there, that these attacks were not being replicated, they suddenly realized, we actually need to manufacture some terrorism right here at home, because otherwise people are going to say, why are we taking off our shoes? Why are we going to all these lengths? And so they started the entrapment game. Now, the entrapment game began in a kind of subtle way, because it would begin with people who really did hate America. They'd find, like, let's just say 3 guys at NYU who are like, we want to kill America, and then the FBI informant was trained to sort of seduce them into advancing the idea. Hey, listen, if you're going to strike at America, why don't you join ISIS? The guy's like, man, I can't join ISIS. I don't even have a passport. And then they go, well, what if we made it available to you to get a passport? Well, I don't know what to do. Well, what if we told you where there's a training camp going on in Pakistan, and you have any money? I only got $400. Well, what if we give you some money and then you'd have $1,000 and we buy you an air ticket? Think of what's going on here. They're luring this guy to advance a scheme that he would not have advanced on his own. He has neither the means nor even the wits to do it. And then the moment before he gets on the plane, 10 agents are there to bust him. The media's been alerted. And then there's a press conference. We're amazing. We busted this amazing plot, and so on. This kind of nonsense. And quite honestly, the left was onto this. Some of these guys, like Trevor Aronson. The problem is that from the point of view of the left, once they started targeting January 6th protesters, the Whitmer kidnapping, using the same playbook, all these guys on the left went silent.
Well, it's true in retrospect. We just covered a lawsuit. I forget the name of it, but it was basically a judge came out and said the level of entrapment here is like a made-for-TV movie. You find vulnerable people, give them money that they didn't have, and you goad them into doing something that they never would have done but for. And then you had the war, and I guess people felt safe for a little while. It does lead you to believe as to whether or not playing history backwards, 9/11 gave rise to all of that state surveillance power, and then. I don't know how many plots they foiled. In the movie, It was one of the ones that actually I was not familiar with. It was a reenactment, but it was replicated based on actual transcripts. Of the guy who was it? He met someone from...
The case involves a group called the Liberty City Seven. This is a bunch of guys in Florida, and they're led by this guy who's kind of a religious seeker, spiritual guru type, but also a bit of a scam artist. And he meets this Muslim guy who presents himself as a sort of senior figure in Al Qaeda. And so this guy discovers that the Muslim guy has money, and the Muslim guy basically says, we got $50,000 on offer for somebody who's willing to like do a big job. So this guy's like, well, what do you mean? And the guy's like, well, it has to be big. And so we recreate this in the film, and there's almost an element of comedy to it, but of course it's a tragic comic scene, because what's happening is this guy is trying to put a scam on Al Qaeda and collect the 50 grand and do nothing. So he comes up with all this exaggerated, absurd stuff. I'll blow up the Sears Tower. The Sears Tower will fall into the ocean and create a tsunami, and the FBI guys are recording him. But this is how devious they are. They realize that when you go before a jury may be skeptical, right? A jury may go, well, how do we know this guy really want to join Al Qaeda? So guess what they do? They tell him, listen, before we give you the money, you have to take the Al Qaeda oath. So this guy...
If I may stop you, the entire scene, though recreated, it's based on the transcripts of the audios, correct? So it's not...
A lot of it is the exact... The oath is actually the exact oath he took.
No, in terms of the description of what this guy was going to do, he's like, I'll blow up the Sears Tower, it's going to fall into the water, cause a tsunami, kill 1 million people, which was this plot that he was subsequently
and he probably came up with that off the top of his head because the Al Qaeda guy kept telling him it needs to be big. And of course, what was really going on here, of course, is he's trying to scam Al Qaeda. Little does he know that the Al Qaeda guy is an FBI informant and that the FBI is scamming him for its own purpose. They want to frame this guy. And in fact, he's out now, but he served a long sentence.